I always believed my family was unbreakable. We weren't perfect, but we were strong, united by love, laughter, and Sunday dinners that seemed to last forever. My father was my hero. My mother was the heart of our home, and I never imagined that one decision, one unthinkable demand from my father, would destroy everything we had built. But sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you trust the most. It all started on an ordinary evening, the kind where everything feels so normal, you'd never guess your life is about to change forever. I still remember the way my father's voice trembled when he called me into the living room. My mom was sitting quietly on the sofa, her hands clenched together like she was holding on to something invisible. The air in the room felt heavy, and I could tell something was wrong. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what he was about to say. Before I tell you what that demand was, you have to understand something about my father. He wasn't a bad man. At least, not in the way most people think of bad men. He was proud, old-fashioned, and believed in control over his business, his home, and even our emotions. He loved deeply, but his love always came with conditions. And for years, we all accepted it because we thought that was just who he was. But love with limits is not really love at all. As I stood there, confused and nervous, my father looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. They weren't warm or familiar anymore. They were cold, distant, almost desperate. His words came out slowly, like he had rehearsed them 100 times but still hated saying them. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "Something your mother doesn't have the strength to do." In that moment, my world froze. My mother looked down, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I tried to make sense of what he was asking. But as he spoke, every word cut deeper than the last. It wasn't just a request, it was an ultimatum. A choice that would force me to pick between loyalty to him and the truth I'd always believed in. I could feel my heart racing, my breath growing shallow. My father's unthinkable demand wasn't just shocking, it was impossible. And when I finally refused, that's when everything fell apart. That night marked the beginning of our family's unraveling, a story filled with secrets, betrayal, and an act of infidelity that none of us saw coming. What my father confessed next didn't just break my mother's heart, it shattered everything we knew about love, trust, and family. Stay with me, because what happened after that moment changed all of our lives forever. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying my father's words in my head, trying to understand how everything had changed so fast. The man who used to tuck me in at night, who taught me to ride a bike and told me that family always comes first, he didn't feel like the same person anymore. His voice echoed in my mind, that same calm but heavy tone that carried more power than a shout. My mother barely spoke. I tried to talk to my mother, but she just shook her head. "Some things are better left unsaid," she whispered, her eyes glistening. That sentence stayed with me. What could be so terrible that she couldn't even say it out loud? What was my father hiding, and why was he dragging us into it? As days passed, I started noticing small things. Late-night phone calls that ended as soon as I walked into the room. Whispers between my parents that stopped when I got too close. My father would come home later and later, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't my mother's. I didn't want to believe what my mind was telling me, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The tension grew thicker every day. Family dinners became quiet battles, forks scraping plates, eyes avoiding one another, emotions locked behind forced smiles. My younger sister asked if everything was okay, but no one answered her. How do you tell a child that the people she loves most are drifting apart because of a truth too painful to face? Then one evening, I overheard my parents arguing. It wasn't loud, but the words were sharp enough to cut through walls. My mother's voice broke as she said, "I can't live with this secret anymore." My father's reply was low, almost pleading. "If you tell them, you'll destroy us." That sentence froze me where I stood. Destroy us? What could be so powerful, so shameful, that telling the truth would break our family? I didn't know it then, but that moment was only the beginning. The secret my father was hiding would soon come to light, and when it did, it would change everything I thought I knew about love. The more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became to pretend everything was fine. My father's distance grew like a shadow that stretched across every corner of our home. He started locking his study, taking phone calls outside, and avoiding family gatherings altogether. My mother, once so full of life, seemed to fade a little more each day. She moved like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear, smiling only when she saw my sister, and even then, her eyes looked empty. I found myself caught in the middle, torn between two people I loved more than anything. I wanted to believe my father had a good reason for everything he was doing. But the whispers, the secrecy, the quiet arguments that always ended with my mother in tears, they were impossible to ignore. My heart wanted to protect him, but my mind kept asking the same question: what was he hiding from us? One evening, I followed him. I know it sounds wrong, but I needed answers. He said he was going to a late business meeting, but something inside me told me that wasn't true. I stayed far enough not to be seen and watched as he parked outside a quiet restaurant on the other side of town. A woman was already there, waiting by the door. She smiled when she saw him, the kind of smile that holds familiarity, comfort, and something more. I felt my chest tighten. I didn't recognize her, but the way he looked at her told me everything I needed to know. Still, I couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, as my father, the man I trusted more than anyone, walked into that restaurant and left a part of my world behind. That night, I realized the truth wasn't just about betrayal. When I got home that night, everything felt different. The walls seemed to close in, like they somehow knew the secret I now carried. My father came in late, just like he said he would, pretending everything was normal. I watched him pour himself a drink, loosen his tie, and sit down at the table across from my mother, who didn't even look up. The air between them was heavy, too heavy, and I could almost hear the silence screaming. I wanted to tell her what I saw. I wanted to scream, to ask why he was lying to us, why he was destroying the family he had built with his own hands. But something inside me stopped. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was denial. Or maybe it was because I knew that once I said it out loud, there would be no going back. The next few days were unbearable. My mother became distant, my father more defensive. I caught him snapping at her over small things, her cooking, her silence, even the way she looked at him. He was angry, but not at her. He was angry because the truth was closing in on him, and he knew it. Then one evening, everything reached a breaking point. My mother found something, an envelope hidden in his briefcase. I'll never forget the look on her face when she opened it. It wasn't just shock, it was heartbreak mixed with betrayal. She turned to him, her voice trembling as she said, "How long were you going to keep this from us?" My father froze, his expression unreadable. My sister and I stood in the doorway, our hearts pounding. And in that moment, I realized this was it, the moment everything would finally come crashing down. What my father said next would decide whether our family could survive or fall apart forever. My father didn't speak right away. He just stared at my mother, his face pale and tight, like he was holding back words that could destroy everything. My mother held up the papers from the envelope, letters, photos, things I didn't fully understand. But from the look in her eyes, I knew it was something more than just betrayal. It was confirmation of everything she'd feared and everything I had tried not to believe. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You don't understand," he said, his tone desperate. "It's not what you think." But the tremble in his voice betrayed him. For years, he had been the one in control, the man who always had an answer, always had a plan. But in that moment, he looked small, cornered by his own lies. My mother's hands shook as she threw the envelope onto the table. "Then explain it," she said. "Explain why there's a woman writing to you, saying she has your child." The words hit like a lightning strike. My sister gasped, and I felt my stomach twist. A child? The room spun. My father didn't deny it right away, and that silence said more than any confession could. My mother broke down, her sobs echoing through the house, and I just stood there, unable to move. The truth had finally surfaced, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something even darker. A few nights later, while trying to calm my sister, I overheard another conversation. This time, I started to wonder if this wasn't just about infidelity. Maybe there was something else, something bigger, tied to that other family, that other life. Every clue seemed to point towards secrets that went far beyond a broken marriage. My father wasn't just afraid of losing us. He was afraid of being exposed. And whatever he was hiding, it was powerful enough to destroy more than just our family. The truth was no longer about betrayal alone. It was about survival. The night everything came to light was stormy, the kind of night that seems to echo what's happening inside a home. Rain pounded against the windows as my father stood in the living room, facing all of us. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. My sister clung to her hand, and I stood near the doorway, my heart racing. There were no more lies left to hide behind. It was time for the truth. He took a deep breath, his voice breaking as he finally said it. "Yes," he admitted. "There is another child." The room fell silent except for the sound of the storm outside. He explained that years ago, during a rough period in his marriage, he had made a terrible mistake. It wasn't love, he said, it was guilt, loneliness, and one moment that spiraled out of control. The woman he had been seeing told him later that she had a son, but she never wanted money or attention. All she wanted was for him to acknowledge the child quietly. He did, and for years he'd been supporting them without telling anyone. My mother's face turned pale, her voice shaking. "So, all this time, you built a second life behind our backs." My father's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I could protect everyone," he said. "But I only destroyed everything instead." Just when I thought the truth was finally out, he pulled another envelope from his coat and handed it to my mother. "You deserve to know everything," he whispered. Inside were legal documents, adoption papers. The child wasn't his by blood. He had been helping the woman hide the truth because she was running from someone dangerous, and he'd sworn to protect her and the child. The revelation hit us like a wave. My mother's tears turned from anger to confusion, and for a moment, none of us knew what to say. My father's unthinkable demand all those weeks ago, his plea for us to trust him, suddenly made sense. But the damage had already been done. Trust was broken, hearts were shattered, and even though the truth wasn't what we feared, it was still a truth that changed everything. That night, as the storm finally quieted, I realized something. Betrayal doesn't always come from lies. It can also come from secrets kept for love. The morning after that storm felt quieter than any morning before. The house, though still filled with tension, seemed lighter, as if the truth, no matter how painful, had finally allowed us to breathe again. My father sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee but not drinking it. My mother stood by the window, her arms folded, her eyes tired but calmer. For the first time in weeks, no one was shouting or crying. We were just still. He apologized again, not just with words but with the kind of honesty that doesn't need to be rehearsed. He admitted that his fear of losing us made him hide things that should have been faced. Over the next few weeks, we tried to rebuild. My father made it clear that the other woman and her child were safe now, and there was no danger anymore. He wanted to come clean because he couldn't live with the weight of his choices. My mother agreed to counseling, not for him but for herself, to heal, to understand, and maybe someday to forgive. My sister slowly began talking to him again, though she still struggled to call him Dad, without hesitation. As for me, I learned something I never expected. Betrayal isn't always about unfaithfulness, it's about broken trust, about secrets that grow heavy when left in the dark. My father's unthinkable demand and the choices that followed tore our family apart, but they also revealed something hidden beneath the pain, the truth that love is not perfect and forgiveness isn't weakness. It's courage. Months later, we sat at the same dinner table where everything had fallen apart. It wasn't the same, and maybe it never would be. But there was peace. My mother reached across and took my father's hand, and in that small, quiet moment, I realized that families don't survive because they avoid breaking,